Vorthak was not a place for the weak. It never had been, and it never would be. The planet's surface was a chaotic mix of jagged mountains, endless deserts of sharp black sand, and rivers that flowed with liquid metal instead of water. The air was thick with toxins, forcing anyone who dared to breathe it without protection to choke on their last breath. Predatory creatures roamed freely, their instincts honed by centuries of survival in this unforgiving world. Vorthak was a death world, and only the strongest could call it home. For as long as they could remember, the Krell had lived on Vorthak. They were tall beings, their skin a deep grayish-green, tough like leather and scarred from countless battles. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, adapted to the dim light that filtered through Vorthak's perpetually overcast skies. The Krell were proud of their resilience. They believed they were unique, the only intelligent species capable of thriving in such a harsh environment. To them, survival was not just a necessity, it was an art form, a way of life. Drek stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking one of Vorthak's many barren valleys. He was a warrior scientist, a rare combination among his people. His body bore the marks of countless fights, but his mind was sharper than most. Drek spent his days studying the patterns of Vorthak's dangers, the migration paths of predators, the cycles of earthquakes, and the subtle changes in the toxic winds. He saw these things not as random events but as puzzles waiting to be solved. Survival, he believed, was about understanding the rules of the game. Behind him, Lyra approached cautiously. She was younger than Drek, her frame slighter but no less strong. Her curiosity often led her into trouble, but it also made her see things others missed. While many Krell accepted their isolation as fact, Lyra wondered if there might be more to the universe beyond Vorthak's toxic skies. She had once asked Drek if they were truly alone, and though he hadn't answered then, her question lingered in his thoughts. "What are you doing out here?" Lyra asked, stopping beside him. Her voice carried a hint of impatience, but there was warmth in her tone. She respected Drek even if she didn't always agree with him. "Watching," Drek replied simply. "The wind is changing." Lyra frowned. "The wind is always changing. What does it matter?" "It matters because it tells us something," Drek said, turning to face her. "Everything here has a pattern. Even the smallest detail can mean the difference between life and death." Lyra crossed her arms. "You're avoiding my real question." Drek sighed. He knew what she meant. For weeks now, Lyra had been pushing him to investigate strange readings she claimed to have detected during her patrols. At first, he dismissed her claims as paranoia or wishful thinking. But when she brought the data to him, a series of unusual energy signatures picked up by one of their ancient scanning devices, he couldn't ignore it any longer. "Fine," Drek said finally. "Let's go look at your readings again." They returned to the research outpost, a crude structure carved into the side of a mountain. Inside, the walls were lined with equipment salvaged from old ruins. Most of it was outdated, patched together with whatever materials they could find. Despite its limitations, the outpost served as the heart of the Krell's scientific efforts. Here, Drek spent hours analyzing data, searching for answers to questions few others cared to ask. Lyra led him to a small console covered in blinking lights and dials. She pointed to a screen displaying a series of erratic lines. "See? These aren't natural. They're too consistent, too deliberate." Drek studied the readings carefully. He recognized the signs of electromagnetic activity, but the pattern was unlike anything he'd seen before. It wasn't coming from Vorthak itself, it was originating from somewhere above the atmosphere. Space. Could it be a storm? Lyra suggested, though her voice betrayed her doubt. "No," Drek said slowly. "This isn't a storm. Storms don't behave like this." Lyra leaned closer, her eyes wide with excitement. "Then what is it?" Drek hesitated. The implications were staggering. If the readings were accurate, and he had no reason to believe they weren't, they suggested the presence of something artificial, something intelligent. The idea was almost too much to comprehend. For generations, the Krell had believed themselves to be the sole survivors of a cruel universe. Now evidence hinted at the existence of others. "We need to confirm it," Drek said at last. "If this is real, we can't ignore it." Over the next few days, Drek and Lyra worked tirelessly to refine their scans. They recalibrated the equipment, adjusted the sensors, and ran simulation after simulation. Each test yielded the same result. The signals were coming from space, and they were growing stronger. Whatever, or whoever, was out there, it was getting closer. Word of their discovery began to spread among the Krell. Some dismissed it as nonsense, refusing to entertain the possibility of outsiders. Others grew fearful, convinced that the signals heralded an invasion. A small group, however, shared Lyra's curiosity. Among them was Jorik, a seasoned hunter who had survived more encounters with Vorthak's predators than anyone else. Though skeptical, he agreed to join Drek and Lyra in investigating further. On the fourth day, the readings reached a peak. The signals were unmistakable now, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. Drek gathered his team and prepared for an expedition to the nearest observation point, a high ridge overlooking the horizon. From there, they hoped to catch a glimpse of whatever was causing the disturbance. As they climbed the ridge, the air grew colder, biting at their exposed skin. The sky above was dark, streaked with swirling clouds of ash and gas. Drek scanned the heavens with a pair of binoculars, searching for any sign of movement. Then suddenly he saw it. A flash of light pierced the gloom, followed by another. Slowly, shapes emerged from the darkness, massive vessels descending through the atmosphere. They were sleek and metallic, their surfaces gleaming despite the haze. The ships moved with precision, as if guided by an unseen hand. Lyra gasped, clutching Drek's arm. "What are they?" "I don't know," Drek admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But they're not from Vorthak." The ships landed in a distant valley, kicking up clouds of dust and debris. For a moment, everything was still. Then, figures began emerging from the vessels. They were humanoid, their forms encased in suits that shimmered faintly. They moved with purpose, setting up equipment and scanning their surroundings. "They're alive," Jorik muttered, his grip tightening on his weapon. "And they're not afraid." Drek felt a surge of emotions, fear, awe, and something else he couldn't quite name. For so long, the Krell had believed themselves to be alone. Now, faced with undeniable proof of other intelligent life, he wasn't sure how to feel. "We need to get closer," Lyra said, her voice trembling with excitement. "We need to know who they are." Drek nodded. He knew she was right, but as they began making their way down the ridge, he couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. The Krell moved cautiously through the jagged terrain, their every step calculated to avoid detection. Drek led the group, his eyes fixed on the distant figures working near the landed ships. Lyra followed close behind, her heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. Jorik brought up the rear, his weapon ready in case things turned dangerous. None of them had ever seen anything like this before, and the weight of the moment pressed heavily on their minds. As they crept closer, details became clearer. The strangers wore suits that seemed to adapt to Vorthak's harsh environment, glowing, faintly as if powered by some unseen energy. Their movements were deliberate but calm, as though they weren't afraid of the deadly world around them. Tools and machines hummed softly as the strangers set up what looked like scanning devices, aiming them at the ground and sky. It was clear they were here to study Vorthak, just as the Krell had studied it for generations. "They're not scared," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "How can they not be scared?" "They have technology," Drek replied quietly. "Maybe they don't need to be," Jorik grunted. "Technology won't save them from everything. This is still Vorthak," Drek nodded. No matter how advanced these outsiders were, Vorthak had ways of testing even the strongest. Still, he couldn't deny the humans' confidence intrigued him. He wondered how long they'd been preparing for this moment, how much they knew about the planet before arriving. Deciding it was time to make contact, Drek signaled for the others to stop. He stepped forward slowly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. Lyra hesitated but eventually joined him, while Jorik hung back, his grip tightening on his weapon. The strangers noticed their approach immediately. One of them, a tall figure with a helmet that reflected the dim light, turned toward them, holding up a device that emitted a series of clicks and whirs. For a moment, no one moved. Then, the stranger lowered the device and spoke. His voice came out distorted, filtered through the suit, but the words were clear enough. "We come in peace." Drek froze, unsure how to respond. The phrase was simple, yet it carried a strange kind of authority. He glanced at Lyra, who shrugged nervously. Finally, Drek raised his hand again, mimicking the gesture. "Who are you?" he asked, speaking loudly and slowly, hoping they might understand. The stranger tilted his head, then tapped something on his arm. A new voice emerged, softer and more natural sounding. "My name is Ryan Carter. I am the leader of this expedition. We mean no harm." Lyra's eyes widened. "They speak our language?" "It's not our language," Drek said, frowning. "Their machine must be translating." Ryan took a step forward, his hand still raised. Beside him, another figure approached, a woman with shorter stature but an air of quiet determination. She held a tablet-like device which glowed faintly as she adjusted its settings. "I'm Dr. Laura Bennett," she said, her voice calm and steady. "We've traveled far to learn about your world." Drek studied them carefully, searching for signs of deception. "Why are you here?" "To explore," Ryan replied. "Your planet is unique. We want to understand how life survives here." The answer surprised Drek. These outsiders weren't conquerors or invaders. They were explorers, much like himself. But trust didn't come easily to the Krell. Centuries of isolation had taught them to rely only on themselves. Still, there was something genuine in Ryan's tone, something that made Drek hesitate. "We thought we were alone," Drek admitted after a pause. "No one else could live here." Ryan smiled faintly. "We're resilient too, just in different ways." Lyra stepped forward, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. "Where do you come from?" "Earth," Ryan answered simply. Planet far from here." "And you breathe without masks?" Lyra asked, gesturing to their suits. Laura nodded. "Our suits filter the air for us. Without them, we wouldn't last long." Drek frowned. "You're not adapted to Vorthak. How do you survive?" "It's not easy," Ryan admitted. "But we've learned to adapt, just like you." The exchange continued, each side asking questions and sharing bits of information. The humans explained their mission: to study Vorthak's ecosystem, gather data, and perhaps find ways to help humanity thrive in extreme conditions. In return, they asked about the Krell, their history, their culture, and their methods of survival. Drek and Lyra answered cautiously, careful not to reveal too much too soon. Despite the progress, tension lingered. Jorik remained on edge, his distrust evident in every glance he shot at the humans. "What if this is a trick?" he muttered when the others paused to discuss next steps. "What if they're lying?" "They haven't attacked us," Drek pointed out. "They've shown no hostility." "That doesn't mean they're trustworthy," Jorik countered. Lyra shook her head. "If they wanted to hurt us, they would have done it already. Look at their weapons. They're better than ours. They could have killed us if they wanted." "Too." "She's right," Drek agreed. "For now, we watch and learn." Over the next few hours, the Krell and humans worked to establish basic communication. The humans used their translation devices to bridge the language gap, while the Krell relied on gestures and patience. Slowly, a fragile understanding began to form. Ryan and Laura demonstrated some of their tools, showing how they analyzed soil samples and monitored atmospheric changes. Drek and Lyra, in turn, shared knowledge of Vorthak's dangers, how to spot predators, predict earthquakes, and navigate the toxic winds. At one point, Laura knelt to examine a patch of glowing moss growing near the edge of the valley. "This is incredible," she said, her voice filled with wonder. Life adapting to such extremes, it's inspiring. Lyra crouched beside her, pointing to the moss. It's poisonous, don't touch it. Laura nodded, making a note on her tablet. Thank you. We'll take precautions. Watching the interaction, Drek felt a flicker of pride. For all their differences, the humans respected the Krell's expertise. They didn't dismiss it or try to impose their own methods. Instead, they listened, eager to learn. As the sun dipped below the horizon, though it was hard to tell under Vorthak's perpetual haze, the two groups prepared to part ways. Ryan extended his hand toward Drek, a gesture of friendship. After a moment's hesitation, Drek grasped it firmly. We'll meet again, Ryan said. There's much we can teach each other. Drek nodded. Be careful. Vorthak will test you. With that, the humans returned to their ships, leaving the Krell to process what had happened. As they made their way back to the outpost, Lyra couldn't stop talking. Did you see their equipment? It's amazing. Imagine what we could do with tools like that, Jorek snorted. Or imagine what they could do to us with tools like that. Drek remained silent, lost in thought. The encounter had raised more questions than answers. Who were these humans, really? What did they want? And most importantly, could the Krell afford to trust them? When they reached the outpost, Drek called a meeting with the elders. News of the humans had spread quickly, and the community was divided. Some saw the arrival as an opportunity, a chance to gain knowledge and improve their lives. Others viewed it as a threat, fearing the humans would exploit Vorthak's resources or overpower the Krell. The debate stretched late into the night, voices rising and falling in heated arguments. Drek listened patiently, weighing the pros and cons. When it was his turn to speak, he stood and addressed the crowd. We've always believed we were alone, he began. Now we know we're not. These humans are different from us, yes, but they share our desire to survive. They've shown no malice, only curiosity. If we turn them away, we risk missing an opportunity to grow stronger. If we embrace them, we risk vulnerability. Either choice carries danger, but staying silent isn't an option. His words struck a chord. Though opinions remained split, a tentative agreement emerged. The Krell would continue interacting with the humans, but cautiously. Drek and Lyra volunteered to serve as liaisons, acting as intermediaries between the two groups. As the meeting concluded, Lyra pulled Drek aside. Do you think we're doing the right thing? I don't know, Drek admitted. But standing still has never saved anyone. Lyra smiled faintly. Let's hope the humans feel the same way. The days that followed the first meeting between the Krell and the humans were tense but productive. Drek and Lyra spent most of their time with Ryan, Laura, and the rest of the human team, learning about their technology and sharing what they knew about Vorthak. The humans were fascinated by the Krell's ability to survive without advanced equipment, while the Krell marveled at the humans' gadgets and machines. Despite their differences, both groups found common ground in their shared goal, survival. But not everyone was happy about the growing partnership. Some Krell elders saw the humans as a threat, fearing they would disrupt the delicate balance of life on Vorthak. Others worried that relying on the humans' technology would weaken the Krell, making them soft and dependent. Jorek, in particular, voiced his concerns loudly during gatherings. They're outsiders, he argued. We don't know what they truly want. What if they're just using us? Drek tried to calm him down. They've given us no reason to distrust them. If we push them away, we lose the chance to learn. And if we let them stay, we risk losing ourselves. Jorek shot back. Lyra stepped in, her voice firm. Change isn't always bad. Maybe it's time we stopped seeing ourselves as alone. We can be stronger together. Her words sparked debate among the Krell, dividing them further. While some agreed with Lyra, others sided with Jorek, creating tension within the community. Drek felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He knew the decisions they made now would shape the future of the Krell, and possibly Vorthak itself. Meanwhile, the humans continued their work, setting up temporary shelters near their ships, and conducting experiments across the valley. Laura spent hours collecting samples of plants, soil, and even fragments of rock, carefully documenting her findings. Ryan focused on building trust, often joining Drek and Lyra on patrols to better understand the dangers of Vorthak. His respect for the Krell grew with each passing day. One evening, as the toxic winds howled outside, the two groups gathered inside one of the Krell's underground shelters. It was a rare moment of calm, and both sides took the opportunity to share stories. Ryan spoke about Earth, describing its blue skies, vast oceans, and thriving cities. The Krell listened intently, captivated by the idea of a world so different from their own. Earth sounds beautiful, Lyra said softly. But fragile too. Ryan nodded. It is. That's why we're here, to find ways to protect it. Learning from your resilience could help us prepare for challenges ahead. Drek leaned forward. And what do you hope to gain from us? Knowledge, resources? Understanding, Ryan replied. Survival isn't just about strength or tools. It's about adaptability, about finding solutions when everything seems impossible. You've mastered that skill. We have much to learn from you. His honesty struck a chord with many of the Krell present. Even Jorik seemed less hostile, though he still kept his distance. For the first time, the divide between the two groups felt smaller. The uneasy peace lasted only a few days before disaster struck. Early one morning, the ground began to tremble. At first, it was subtle, a faint vibration beneath their feet, but within minutes, the shaking grew violent. Rocks tumbled down cliffs and cracks split the earth like jagged scars. An earthquake, more powerful than any in recent memory, was tearing through the valley. Drek and Lyra rushed to warn the humans. The settlement, Drek shouted over the noise. It's too close to the fault line. Ryan and Laura sprang into action, ordering their team to secure their equipment and evacuate. But the quake moved faster than anyone anticipated. A massive fissure opened near the edge of the camp, swallowing tents and supplies whole. Panic spread as the humans scrambled to escape. We need to help them, Lyra cried, grabbing Drek's arm. He hesitated for only a second before nodding. Stay close. Together they joined the chaos, working alongside the humans to pull people to safety. Jorik arrived moments later, leading a group of Krell warriors. Despite his earlier hostility, he didn't hesitate to lend a hand. We'll hold the line, he barked, gesturing for his team to stabilize collapsing structures. The earthquake showed no mercy. Buildings crumbled and clouds of dust filled the air, making it hard to see. Amid the destruction, a young Krell child became trapped under a fallen beam. Her cries echoed through the chaos, drawing Drek's attention. Without thinking, he ran toward her, dodging falling debris. Ryan spotted him and followed. What are you doing? He yelled. There's a child, Drek shouted back. Help me lift this. Ryan didn't hesitate. Together they strained. Against the heavy beam, their muscles burning with effort. Just as it began to shift, Laura appeared with a hydraulic jack salvaged from the wreckage. Use this, she called, sliding the device into place. With the combined strength of the three of them, they managed to free the child. She clung to Drek, sobbing, as he carried her to safety. Around them, the quake finally began to subside, leaving behind a scene of devastation. Tents lay flattened, equipment was scattered, and several injuries had been reported. But thanks to the efforts of both the Krell and the humans, no lives had been lost. As the dust settled, Drek looked around at the aftermath. Human and Krell worked side by side, tending to the wounded and clearing debris. The earthquake had tested them all, but it had also brought them closer together. In that moment, Drek realized something important. Survival wasn't just about enduring hardship alone. Sometimes it was about leaning on others, trusting them to share the burden. Later that night, as the survivors rested in the shelter, Ryan stood before the group. His face was smudged with dirt, and exhaustion lined his features, but his voice was steady. Today proved something, he said. We may come from different worlds, but we're stronger when we work together. This planet tried to break us, but it couldn't. Not as long as we stood united. The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Lyra glanced at Drek, who gave her a small nod. She stepped forward, addressing the crowd. For years, we've believed we were alone. We thought our strength came from isolation, but today showed us otherwise. Strength doesn't mean standing apart. It means reaching out, even when it's hard. Her speech earned murmurs of agreement from both Krell and humans. Even Yorick, who had always been the loudest opponent of the alliance, remained quiet, his expression thoughtful. Over the next few days, the two groups worked tirelessly to rebuild. The humans repaired their damaged equipment, while the Krell helped fortify the camp against future quakes. Slowly, the rift between them began to heal. Trust, once fragile, started to take root. One afternoon, as Drek and Ryan surveyed the progress, Ryan turned to him. "You've changed my perspective," he admitted. "I thought coming here would be about teaching us how to survive. Instead, you've shown me what true resilience looks like." Drek smiled faintly. "And you've reminded us that sometimes asking for help isn't weakness. It's wisdom." As they shook hands, a sense of hope filled the air. The earthquake had nearly destroyed them, but it had also forged a bond stronger than either side had imagined. For the first time, the Krell and the humans began to see themselves not as separate entities, but as part of something greater, a shared struggle for survival on a deadly world. The days after the earthquake were a blur of activity. The Krell and humans worked side by side, rebuilding what had been lost and preparing for whatever Vorthak might throw at them next. The quake had left its mark not just on the land, but also on the people. It had forced both groups to confront their fears, doubts, and differences. In doing so, it had brought them closer together than anyone could have imagined. Drek found himself spending more time with Ryan and Laura, learning about their plans for the future. The humans wanted to establish a permanent base on Vorthak, a place where they could continue studying the planet while working alongside the Krell. Drek admired their ambition, but knew it wouldn't be easy. Convincing the Krell elders to agree would take more than good intentions. It would require proof that this partnership was worth the risk. Lyra, too, was deeply involved in the discussions. She spent hours talking with Laura, sharing stories of the Krell's past and listening to tales of Earth. The two women formed a strong bond, united by their curiosity and determination to bridge the gap between their worlds. Lyra often wondered if she and Laura could pave the way for others to follow, to show that trust and cooperation were possible, even between such different species. Jorik, however, remained skeptical. Though he had helped during the earthquake, his distrust of the Ayo humans ran deep. He believed the Krell should focus on their own survival, not waste time helping outsiders adapt. "They'll leave eventually," he muttered to Drek one evening. "When they've taken what they need, they'll abandon us." "They haven't given us a reason to think that," Drek replied calmly. "And besides, we're stronger together. You saw that during the quake." Jorik shook his head. "Strength isn't about numbers, it's about self-reliance. If we depend on them, we lose who we are." Drek didn't argue further. He understood Jorik's concerns, but he also knew that clinging to old ways wouldn't protect the Krell forever. Change was inevitable, whether they liked it or not. To address these tensions, Drek called another meeting with the elders. This time, he invited Ryan and Laura to attend, hoping their presence would help ease some of the fears. The gathering took place in the largest underground shelter, where rows of torches cast flickering shadows on the walls. The air was thick with anticipation as the Krell gathered to hear what the humans had to say. Ryan stepped forward, addressing the crowd. "We know you have questions and concerns about our presence here. We respect that, but let me tell you why we believe this alliance is important. Your world is unlike anything we've ever seen. By working together, we can learn from each other. You can teach us how to survive in extreme conditions, and we can offer tools and knowledge to make life easier for everyone," Laura added. "This isn't about taking over. It's about building something new, a shared home where both our peoples can thrive." The room grew quiet as the Krell processed their words. Some nodded in agreement, while others exchanged wary glances. One elder, an older Krell named Thalok, spoke up. You speak of unity, but how do we know your promises will last? What happens when things get difficult? Ryan met his gaze steadily. Difficulties will come, that's unavoidable. But I promise you this, we won't give up. Not on Vorthak, and not on you. The sincerity in his voice seemed to sway even the most hesitant listeners. Slowly, the tide began to turn. More and more Krell voiced their support for the partnership, citing the success of their joint efforts during the earthquake. Even Jorik stayed silent, though his scowl suggested he wasn't fully convinced. After hours of debate, a decision was reached. The Krell agreed to allow the humans to stay, for now. They would work together to build a hybrid settlement, combining the strengths of both groups. It was a fragile agreement, held together by hope and mutual respect. But it was a start. Construction began immediately. The humans brought advanced machinery to clear debris and lay foundations, while the Krell used their knowledge of the land to choose safe locations and reinforce structures against future disasters. Together, they designed buildings that blended human technology with Krell ingenuity, creating spaces that were both functional and resilient. As the settlement took shape, so did the bonds between the two groups. Humans and Krell shared meals, told stories, and celebrated small victories. Children played together, laughing despite the harsh surroundings. For the first time in generations, the Krell felt a sense of connection to something larger than themselves, but challenges still loomed. Supplies were limited and resources stretched thin. Arguments occasionally flared over priorities, whether to focus on defense, food production, or research. Through it all, Drek and Ryan worked tirelessly to mediate disputes and keep the project moving forward. Their leadership inspired others to set aside their differences and work toward a common goal. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, or rather, the endless haze that passed for a sky, Drek stood atop a newly built watchtower overlooking the settlement. Below him, lights flickered in the darkness, a testament to the progress they'd made. Beside him, Lyra joined him, her expression thoughtful. It's strange, she said softly. I used to think we were alone. Now I wonder if we ever really were. Drek smiled faintly. Maybe we weren't meant to be. Maybe surviving Vorthak wasn't supposed to be done alone. Lyra nodded. Do you think we can make this work, truly? I think we have to, Drek replied. If we don't, then everything we've built, all the sacrifices, all the risks, it'll mean nothing. His words lingered in the air as they gazed out at the settlement. Despite the hardships, there was a sense of hope, a belief that they could overcome anything as long as they stood together. The following morning, Ryan gathered everyone in the central square. He climbed onto a makeshift platform, his voice carrying across the crowd. Today marks the beginning of something new, he said. Not just a settlement, but a community, a place where humans and Krell can live, learn, and grow side by side. It won't always be easy. There will be setbacks, disagreements, and moments of doubt. But if we face those challenges together, I believe we can create something extraordinary. Cheers erupted from the crowd, echoing through the valley. For the first time, the cheers came not just from the humans or the Krell, but from both, united in purpose. In the weeks that followed, the settlement flourished. New technologies improved farming techniques, allowing crops to grow in soil once thought barren. Advanced medical treatments saved lives that might otherwise have been lost. And perhaps most importantly, the exchange of ideas sparked innovation neither group could have achieved alone. Drek watched it all unfold with a mix of pride and relief. The path ahead wouldn't be without obstacles, but he knew they were ready to face them. As he stood beside Ryan, watching the sunrise paint the toxic clouds in shades of orange and red, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the humans, but for the Krell who had dared to embrace change. We did it, Ryan said quietly, breaking the silence. Drek nodded. No, we did it. And for the first time in centuries, the Krell no longer saw themselves as the only survivors of a cruel universe. They had found allies, friends, and a new way of life. Together, they had proven that even on a death world like Vorthak, survival wasn't just about enduring, it was about thriving. The settlement continued to grow, its boundaries expanding as new structures rose from the barren ground. The hybrid community became a symbol of what could be achieved when two vastly different groups worked together. But even in this newfound harmony, challenges persisted. Vorthak was relentless, and it tested the resolve of both humans and Krell every single day. One morning, as Drek walked through the central square, he noticed a group of humans gathered around a small machine. It hummed softly, its lights blinking in rhythmic patterns. Laura stood nearby, explaining its purpose to a cluster of curious Krell. "This is a water purifier," she said, pointing to the device. "It can filter toxins from liquid metal, rivers, and make the water safe to drink." A young Krell named Tren stepped forward, his eyes wide with fascination. "You mean we won't have to rely on rainwater anymore?" Laura smiled. "Exactly. With this, we can ensure everyone has clean water, no matter the season." Drek felt a surge of pride as he watched the interaction. Moments like these reminded him why the partnership mattered. The humans brought technology that could solve problems the Krell had struggled with for generations, while the Krell's deep understanding of Vorthak's environment helped refine and adapt those solutions. But not everything was going smoothly. Supplies were running low, and tensions began to rise among some members of the community. A few humans grew frustrated with the slow pace of progress, while certain Krell elders worried that relying too heavily on human tools would weaken their traditions. Arguments broke out during meetings, voices rising as each side defended their perspective. Ryan called for calm one evening, standing before a restless crowd in the main hall. "We're all tired," he admitted. "And yes, things aren't perfect. But giving up isn't an option. We've come too far to turn back now." Drek nodded in agreement. "He's right. If we let disagreements divide us, we'll lose everything we've built." Jorik, who had been unusually quiet during recent discussions, finally spoke up. "I still don't trust them," he said, gesturing toward the humans. "But I trust you, Drek. If you believe this is the right path, then I'll support it. For now." His reluctant endorsement carried weight, and the room gradually settled into a tense but manageable silence. Decisions were made to ration resources more carefully and prioritize projects that benefited both groups equally. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it kept the peace, for the time being. As weeks turned into months, the settlement faced another trial. A massive storm swept across Vorthak, its winds carrying shards of razor-sharp debris. The humans' shelters, though sturdy, weren't designed to withstand such extreme conditions. Panic spread as cracks appeared in walls and roofs began to buckle under the pressure. "We need to reinforce the buildings," Ryan shouted over the howling wind. Quickly, the Krell sprang into action, using materials scavenged from the surrounding area to shore up weak points. Lyra led a team of volunteers, showing the humans how to weave flexible vines into protective barriers that could deflect the flying debris. Together they worked tirelessly, braving the storm to save their homes. When the tempest finally passed, exhaustion hung heavy in the air. Damage was significant, but thanks to their combined efforts, no lives had been lost. Standing amidst the wreckage, Laura looked at Drek with gratitude in her eyes. "Without your people, we wouldn't have made it through that." Drek shook his head. "We couldn't have done it without yours either. Survival here takes all of us." The storm left scars, but it also strengthened the bonds between the two groups. They realized that their differences weren't weaknesses. They were strengths. Where one faltered, the other excelled. Slowly, the settlement began to recover, rebuilt stronger than before. During this time, Lyra took on a new role as a mediator between the humans and the Krell. Her natural curiosity and quick thinking made her invaluable in resolving disputes and fostering understanding. She often acted as a bridge, translating not just language but also cultural nuances that might otherwise cause misunderstandings. One afternoon, she approached Drek with an idea. "What if we hold a festival?" she suggested. "Something to celebrate how far we've come." Drek raised an eyebrow. "A festival? In the middle of all this?" "Why not?" Lyra replied. People need hope. They need to remember why they're fighting so hard. Convinced by her enthusiasm, Drek agreed. Plans for the event spread quickly, igniting excitement throughout the settlement. Humans and Krell alike pitched in, decorating the central square with colorful banners and setting up tables laden with food. Music filled the air as instruments from both worlds came together in an improvised symphony. On the night of the festival, the square buzzed with energy. Humans and Krell danced side by side, their laughter echoing through the valley. Children chased each other playfully, unconcerned by the toxic skies above. For a few precious hours, the hardships of Vorthak faded, into the background replaced by joy and camaraderie. Ryan raised a cup in a toast, his voice carrying over the crowd. To survival, he said, and to the future we're building together. Cheers erupted, the sound mingling with the music and laughter. Even Jorik cracked a rare smile, clapping along with the others. In that moment, the unity they had, fought so hard for, felt real and possible, but the celebration was short-lived. The next morning, a scout returned with alarming news. A pack of Vorthak's deadliest predators, the Shadowstalkers, had been spotted moving toward the settlement. These creatures were larger and more aggressive than any predator the Krell had encountered before, their glowing eyes visible even in daylight. Drek immediately called a meeting. "We need to prepare," he said. "These beasts are dangerous, and they won't hesitate to attack." Ryan nodded. "Our weapons can help, but we'll need your knowledge of their behavior to stand a chance." Plans were drawn up, defenses fortified. Traps were set around the perimeter, and patrols doubled in size. Everyone knew the stakes. Failure meant destruction, not just of the settlement but of the fragile alliance they had built. When the Shadowstalkers arrived, they struck with terrifying speed. Their claws tore through makeshift barricades and their roars shook the ground. But the defenders held firm, combining Krell tactics with human firepower. Drek led a charge against the largest of the beasts, his spear striking true as Ryan fired bursts from a handheld weapon. Together they brought it down, rallying the others to push back the rest of the pack. By dawn, the battle was over. They, Shadowstalkers, retreated into the wilderness, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Though battered and bruised, the settlement remained intact. Cheers of victory rang out, but they were tempered by the knowledge of how close they had come to disaster. In the aftermath, Drek addressed the weary survivors. "Today proved something important," he said. "We're not just surviving, we're thriving because we're standing together." Ryan stepped forward, placing a hand on Drek's shoulder. "This is only the beginning. Whatever comes next, we'll face it, together." As the sun rose over the jagged horizon, casting light on the scarred but resilient settlement, hope burned brighter than ever. The Krell and humans had proven that even on a death world like Vorthak, unity could overcome anything. And though the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, they faced it with courage, determination, and the unshakable belief that they were stronger together.